The Assassin's Creed franchise is one I have a strange relationship with. I don't remember which game it was, probably Revelations, but I remember buying it. Or should I say my mum buying it for me from the top floor of an Asda. They were games I've played all throughout my life, but Unity is only the second I've completed. You see, what I used to do was just run around the open world, killing guards and running across rooftops until I got bored. The first Assassin's Creed game where I actually completed the story was Origins, and I absolutely loved it. It's the game that started the franchise's turn to the RPGs they've become, and for that it's become controversial. But for me, it's one of my favourite games with one of my favourite protagonists. What it didn't make me do was go back and play any of the older games. That was until I decided to play Unity. This happened recently. I was watching a lot of videos about it, and the love people spoke with convinced me to play it. I already owned it. I don't remember when I bought it, but I did. So I loaded it up. I had to find out for myself whether this was the faceless disaster it released as, or the best Assassin's Creed game ever made. And what I found was a game with bags of potential. It's a game that I would recommend to everyone to play, but that recommendation would have to come with a massive disclaimer. You see, the ambition in this recreation of a revolutionary Paris is incredible, and filling the streets with this many people, even if a lot of them look oddly familiar, is something to be praised. The ambition, the idea of Unity would have made for a masterpiece, an absolute marvel of entertainment. It could have been the greatest game ever created, but at every hurdle it falls. With every step forward, there's a leap backwards. With every cool moment, there is a bag full of frustrating ones. Unity is a game that's ideas are perfect, but its execution is poor. It's a guillotine that only takes the head every now and then. I love Unity, but at the same time, I hate it. We open with a child. You play as young Arno as he explores a palace, steals apples and hides from guards, all because of a girl he's just met. A girl he'll spend the next 20 years and 20 hours desperately chasing. In all honesty, it's a pretty good introduction to stealth, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. But the real purpose of this section is to introduce us to the story. This is the first time Arno meets Elise, the only redhead in Paris and a future Templar, but we don't know that yet. But the more important moment is when his father is killed. Arno wasn't there. He was supposed to wait where his father left him, but he was too busy chasing Elise. This is the crux of Arno's character. The words "nothing is true and everything is permitted" are words that hold a special importance to him. He's self-indulgent, reckless and disobedient. Arno starts the game at fault for his own father's murder. It hooks you. Who killed your father? And provides an emotional foundation for the rest of the story to build on. You're then taken in by Elise's father, and Arno, being the romantic he is, he never stops chasing her. And it's probably the highlight of the intro. Their relationship, the way it's written, the chemistry that is so clear in these short moments together is captivating.
You seem to have caused quite a commotion.
Well, what can I say? You were always a bad influence.
Oh, you were a worse one. Are you wearing one of my father's suits?
Are you wearing a dress?
Don't even start. I feel like a mummy wrapped up in this thing.
Must be quite an occasion to get you so fancy.
It's not like that. Truth be told, it's a lot of ceremony and pontification. Dull as dirt.
Well, when you don't invite me to your parties, everyone suffers.
I did try, but my father was adamant.
Your father?
Go. I'll distract them.
What? You're kicking me out?
It's complicated. I'll explain later, but for now, out the window.
Oh, no. You're not turning this into a repeat of that apple orchard.
Stop being such a baby. I'm sure there aren't any guard dogs this time. Go!
It sits at the core of the rest of the story. Arno's battle between the assassins and Elise, and is where most of the tension and emotion for the rest of the story is born from, and it's fantastically introduced. But as I'll talk about later, that emotion, the character we get to see here, doesn't last the whole game. But what we do get is another example of Arno's disobedience. He is so unbelievably selfish. His pursuit of Elise leads to her father's death, just as it led to his own. That stolen kiss, those moments he has with her at the party, end their relationship and send him to prison. He witnessed the murder of Francois Delasere, and in revolutionary Paris, a man of Arno's standing stood no chance. But it did mean he got to meet Belette. Pisspot, the affectionate nickname he gives to Arno, and probably the nicest thing you could say to him. Belek is an assassin, and a charismatic one at that. He notices a stopwatch Arno has. It belonged to a man he once knew, an assassin he once knew. We're given the first answer to the mystery at this game's core. Charles Dorian wasn't just Arno's father, he was an assassin, and maybe Arno's fate is the same. But first, he must escape. It takes months. We don't see any of those months, but as revolutionary Paris explodes, the walls of this fortress that once appeared impenetrable are exposed. You fight your way through the guards and reach the roof. But hang on, how can you get down? Belek leaps, Arno follows reluctantly. Your first leap of faith and the first step into the Brotherhood. So what does Arno do with his newfound freedom? Does he go and follow in his father's footsteps, join the Brotherhood? No, that's not the Arno we know. Arno finds Elise. What else would he do?
That's some welcome.
One can't be too careful. Not after what happened.
Elise,
Haven't you done enough to repay my father's kindness?
Elise, please. You can't believe I killed Monsieur de la Serre. Your father, he wasn't the man you thought he was. Neither of our fathers were.
I know exactly who my father was, Arno. And I know who yours was. I suppose it was inevitable. You an assassin, me a Templar.
You?
Does that shock you? My father always meant for me to follow in his footsteps. Now all I can do is avenge him.
I swear to you, I had nothing to do with his death.
But you did.
No. No! By my life, I swear I didn't. Is that?
A letter intended for my father the day he was murdered.
France's most hopeless romantic and maybe one of the first stalkers. But she's found the letter. She knows Arno's at fault for her father's death, even if he didn't strike him down. And she's a Templar. This is where Romeo and Juliet separate, and in many ways it's where the story falls apart. But it's also where Arno joins the Brotherhood, and it's where we can start talking about the gameplay. Unity took a new approach to assassinations, the black box missions. They offer you a variety of approaches to take down your target, from stealth to open combat, with the latter option not being a great idea. And they're also the best way to talk about the gameplay, which, like everything else in Unity, is entirely imperfect. You'll start on a rooftop looking down on your scene, and you'll be given a selection of options for things to do to make your assassination easier. It gives you a sandbox style approach to these missions, and they're really enjoyable. There's no better way to create the feeling of being an assassin than giving the player options for how they want to take down their target. The agency they offer you is their best feature. Your first is the Notre Dame assassination. This is where Arno finally, after all his training, has been allowed to take the life of a Templar. It's a big moment and a great set piece. The Notre Dame is an incredible sight and makes for an even better location. The amount of entrances and exits and ways to approach this mission is fantastic. But I do hope Belek wasn't watching my attempt, because it sent me straight back to basic training. I got spotted fairly early on and had to escape, but the escape mechanic added this whole new dynamic to the game which I really enjoyed. Being seen didn't mean I'd instantly desync. Having to reevaluate after being seen made for a more memorable experience. And because this was all very new to me, it didn't go very well, and it didn't end up being my favourite. Actually, the one I really enjoyed was the Lafreniere assassination. I ran across the rooftops, killing all the guards before he arrived. I found his elite guard in the sewers and killed them. I prepared, laid my trap, and waited in a haystack until he arrived. This mission made me feel like an assassin. I was stalking my prey from the rooftops, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike, and then he stood there, talking to some guards. I threw a smoke bomb, leaped from the safety of the dark rooftops into the smoke, and assassinated my target. And the exit was just as swift. Another smoke bomb to disorientate the soldiers, and a quick escape to the rooftops of Paris. When these missions work, when every system comes together, it can feel incredible. It may be be the best incarnation of the assassin fantasy. I looked forward to them at the end of every sequence, just thinking about how I'm going to be able to approach my target. But unfortunately, they don't work that often. For these black box missions to work, you require a miracle. If you try and use the Phantom Blade, then good luck shooting your target. The quick shot works sometimes, but a lot of the time, even though you're highlighting the person right in front of you, it will fire in a completely different direction. Aiming manually does alleviate that frustration, but I just wish it all worked consistently, because when it does work, it gives you the option for a new approach to stealth. That paired with the inconsistent detection system, which can have enemies spotting you through walls or just from angles you're sure they shouldn't be able to spot you, can make for an overwhelmingly frustrating experience. But some of these issues are probably born out of my own incompetence with stealth. I always manage to get spotted somehow. So when stealth does fall apart, which for me was inevitable, how does Unity's combat hold up? If you asked me this question straight after I'd finished it, I'd have said it holds up really well. I enjoyed the combat. In fact, I wrote a whole section of this analysis already on how much I enjoyed it, with a few problems. But since then, I've played through the first Assassin's Creed, and that's given me a new perspective on combat. That doesn't mean I don't think it's any good. Arno is a skilled swordsman, and the animation sells the fantasy incredibly well. I do just wish the animations lined up a little bit more often, and there's a decent amount of enemy variety, with each one requiring a different approach. The standard soldier, you just have to wait for the perfect opportunity to parry before landing a few shots of your own. Others require a stagger strike or to parry a few strikes before you're able to land a shot of your own. And there are the heavy enemies who have unblockable strikes, meaning you have to use your dodge button. All in all, combat is very fun, and it's challenging throughout the game. You'll often find yourself needing to escape, dropping a smoke bomb either to get a few hits in or to give yourself time to run away. The dodge also has the additional benefit of creating space between you and the enemy, meaning you have time to get a couple of shots off and thin the herd that may be chasing you. However, the combat doesn't avoid the problems present within the rest of the game. It's not what could be considered consistent. But before I mention its problems, let me tell you why I brought up Assassin's Creed 1. Altair has a deceptively simple approach to combat. It can be very easy to just counterkill when you've got the ability. Luckily, this isn't a pitfall Unity has. There's never just one approach that will work. But AC1 also has an incredibly deep combat system that other people are far better at than me. Just look at the shock and awe mechanic. When you kill a guard, another in a group will randomly drop their guard and give you a chance to get a hit in on them. What you can also do, if you're fast enough, is assassinate them, causing someone else to drop their guard, and the cycle repeats. The other way combat has depth is through the combo system. It can often feel like you're just wailing on enemies, waiting for their guard to break, and then killing them. But Assassin's Creed 1 actually has a rhythm-based combat model. If you time your strikes with the time your oars and your enemy's blade connect, then you can use a combo that will kill enemies faster. This depth is what makes the combat in AC1 my favourite in the series so far, and unfortunately it's been stripped out of the subsequent games, including Unity. It's not necessarily a slight on Unity. I have other problems with their approach to combat, but I am disappointed they chose not to keep the combat of AC1 and just improve it in the franchise. But now let's get back to Unity. This is why you clicked on the video. Unity's combat is based largely around perfect parries and retaliation strikes, which makes for engaging and challenging gameplay. However, the difficulty doesn't always come because of the parry windows being precise, because pressing the right button at the right time isn't the only battle you'll wager in this game. Every time you press a button, you play a game of chance. Spin the wheel of fate and hope Arno will respond. Often telling him what to do in combat feels like yelling at a toddler that can't understand you. It just isn't responsive, which is probably a symptom of this game not getting enough time in development. But this isn't combat's only shortcoming. The animations, which normally look great, aren't consistent. They glitch a lot. But in all honesty, it didn't break my immersion that much, and it wasn't that frustrating. That was unless I was using one of the long spears, and in that case, the animations just weren't very good. It didn't feel like they lined up with the enemies a lot of the time. And the final problem with the combat is the guns. I think all the enemies have them and they just can't wait to pull them out, which is fine, it adds more depth, but completely destroys the flow of combat. Instead of a rhythmic dance of balanced steel, you look like a fish flailing around on the ground, desperately trying to avoid the shots that come at you from every angle, and all you can do is dodge. They needed to give you more options for dealing with gunfire, like a human shield, or just give the enemies less guns so you're only avoiding 2 shots instead of 6. But all in all, the combat is pretty good. It's enjoyable, challenging, and frustrating. It's as imperfect as the rest of the experience, and I only have one final thing to say about it. Well, not the combat, more the way it's used. This game has a couple of boss fights, and the one I want to talk about is your fight against Belek. Yes, the man who introduced you into the Brotherhood, Pisspot himself, is your first boss fight. And I'll get into the reasons you have this fight in a moment when I go back to the story. But what I want to talk about now is why mechanically this is one of the worst boss fights I've ever played. Belek is a master assassin. He trained Arno, so saying that you'd expect this fight to be an incredibly challenging one that truly tests your mastery of the sword fighting mechanics. Maybe it includes parkour. This fight is a test of how far you've come as an assassin, and you could do it with your eyes closed. This combat model was built for fighting multiple people. The yellow glow you get when a perfect parry is available is necessary information for fights against multiple guards, but against one person it makes the fight trivial. And they don't do anything to make this fight more interesting, more challenging. A boss fight is meant to test your mastery, but the only thing Belek tested was my patience when he stopped taking damage even though I was hitting him. Do you want to know how I beat him? Stagger strike, hit, hit, hit. Stagger strike, hit, hit, hit. Dodge, hit, dodge, hit. There was no creativity, there was nothing to engage you, and it makes what should have been one of the most emotionally resonant moments of this story so far feel hollow. But it isn't the only thing that ruins this moment. For that, we have to check back in with the story. The introduction to this game was strong. It left me wanting more. I wanted to see what would happen with Arno in the Brotherhood. I wanted to see how his relationship with Elise would develop, especially after learning that he was in part responsible for her father's death and that she was a Templar. But unfortunately, it never went anywhere. We spend the next 5 hours being given targets by the Brotherhood and going out to kill them. Every conversation is exposition. Every mission is either about gathering intelligence through tailing or an assassination. And while the memories you get after you kill your target are interesting, they fall short of the emotional weight the confessions of previous games had. Take Sir Brand.
You are afraid,
Of course I am afraid.
but you'll be safe now, held in the arms of your god.
Have my brothers taught you nothing? I know what waits for me. For all of us.
If not your god, then what?
Nothing. Nothing waits. And that is what I fear.
You don't believe.
How could I, given what I know? What I've seen? Our treasure was the proof.
Proof of what?
That this life is all we have.
Linger a while longer then, and tell me of the part you were to play.
A blockade by sea. To keep the fool kings and queens from sending reinforcements. Once we...
Conquered the Holy Land?
freed it, you fool. From the tyranny of faith.
Freedom? You worked to overthrow cities, control men's minds, murdered any who spoke against you.
I followed my orders, believing in my cause. Same as you.
How he talks of fearing death now he's seen the truth. He gives us information about what the Templars have been doing and what their plans are, but there's character and emotion present at the same time. The memories just don't have enough weight. They feel like just simply exposition. Throughout my whole time with this game, it felt like character and story took a backseat to gameplay. We very rarely see anything past the most surface level elements of these characters, and that's a big part of what made the Belek fight so disappointing. After Arno's reconnected with Elise and brought her into the Brotherhood, a fantastic idea that only someone who isn't completely smitten with someone would do. You go to meet Mirabeau, the leader of the Parisian Brotherhood and organizer of a peace pact between the Assassins and the Templars. But when you get to his house, you find him laying there, dead. He was poisoned by a substance commonly used by Templars. Everything points towards it being Elise who poisoned him. But Arno just cannot believe that, and after tracking down the poison seller and meeting the man who bought the poison, he finds out that Mirabeau was actually killed by Belek.
Took you long enough, Pisspot.
Belek?
Should've known it'd be you that'd find me. Only question is, what happens now?
You poisoned Mirabeau!
He poisoned us! Peace with the Templars is a fairy tale.
And you're the only one who can save the Brotherhood?
You think it's the first time this has happened? The first time that the Assassins have been forced to purge their leadership? The first time that the Order has built itself back up from nothing to power. No. Masyaf, Monteregione, the American colonies. It's all happened before. And we have risen anew, stronger than ever. But now, we've lost our purpose, Arno. We mired ourselves in politics and revolutions, but we're not a nation. We're an army. And in an army, making peace with the enemy is called treason. No, I'm not the only one that can save the Brotherhood. We can. Together.
Belek, you know I can't do that.
This moment is supposed to come as a shock. It devastates Arno, but for us, it means nothing. We spent no time with Belek. He may train Arno, and at this point, they've known each other for well over a year. Yet I have only seen them together a handful of times. This moment has no emotion, and his big speech about why he did it means nothing. He believes the Brotherhood has lost its soul. It's an army, not a nation. He wants Arno to join him in bringing the Brotherhood back to glory. But we barely know the Brotherhood. We see them for mere minutes before they send us off to kill someone. You get hints that they don't all agree with each other, but the depth that's required to make this scene work isn't there. It's well performed. The whole game is, the motion capture and voice work is fantastic. They make you believe these characters actually have personality and that they feel what they're saying. So it's a shame the writing falls so far short. And what makes it worse is we find out Belek saved Arno's father once.
Thank you, my friend.
Gotta get you back to that boy of yours in one piece. Don't we, pisspot? Drop this.
After we assassinate him, in his memories, we see they knew each other and were even friends. And maybe if we'd have got some of that before we kill him, maybe if we'd actually got to see his relationship with Arno develop, this moment could have landed. But unfortunately, it doesn't. And luckily for Unity, it's not the only relationship that feels shallow. Arno and Elisa's relationship is the emotional core of this story, and in the intro, it's exactly what it needed to be. But then we don't see her for 5 hours. She just disappears from the story completely. This is until we rescue her from the Templar plot to kill her, and then chase her across the rooftops of Paris as she floats away in a hot air balloon. But I will say, the moment they do share when Arno finally catches up is sweet.
Next time, I plan the escape route. It's beautiful.
From up here, you'd never know the nation is tearing itself apart.
Can things ever go back to the way they were before, do you think?
Do you? After everything that's happened? Everything we've lost?
So that's it then. The course of history forever altered, never again to return.
Maybe we can't go back. But going forward isn't necessarily an ending.
Elise, You cheated.
You took too long.
I love you.
It harkens back to what we saw in the intro. They have believable chemistry again. I just don't think it lasts. Arno is smitten with Elise. That's clear for anyone to see. Even a blind man could see it. But the relationship doesn't work because neither of them have any depth. Arno just wants Elise to fall in love with him. He fell in with the Brotherhood, but everything he's doing is in hopes that he can finally be with Elise, and she barely cares for him. Elise is far more invested in her own revenge plot. She's out to kill the men who killed her father. Arno doesn't matter to her the same way she does to him, and the relationship feels incredibly one-sided. Arno does everything for her. He even betrays the Brotherhood for her. He picks his own target. He went after Germain and failed. And because of that, he's stripped of his place in the Creed. Finally, a moment of character. The selfishness that led to Elisa's father dying now means he's lost his place in the Brotherhood. And I have to commend Unity for this. It brings us some semblance of character and gives Arno an arc of sorts, albeit a shallower one. Much shallower than the barrels of booze he tries to drown himself in. We're back in Versailles, back where Arno's life fell apart. No longer does Arno wear his robes. This is rock bottom, but a high point for the story. And it's not the only thing I have to commend Versailles for, because once Elise finds him and gives him his father's watch, he puts his robes back on, because we have a target to assassinate. Latouche is slippery. We first meet him in the Kingdom of the Beggars. He feeds us information, pulling the strings all while looking like a rat scampering through the sewers. But as Arno is called up for execution, one of Unity's unique assassination opportunities, and what now feels like a neat callback to one of Assassin's Creed 1's best assassinations. His hands loosely held behind his back, Latouche in touch in distance. You're the next parasite he plans to cleanse from Versailles, but he doesn't realise who he's caught to the guillotine until he sees past the hood. He sees Arno, and in his final moments, he realises he's just called his executioner to his side. It's an incredible moment that you can miss. You don't have to assassinate him like this. And it's brilliant that you're offered so much freedom when it comes to assassinations. There is no better way to immerse you in the fantasy than to give you a choice over how to take down your target. His memories were a nice moment, but still, they lacked emotion. But Arno's done with Versailles. Paris is calling and Germain is waiting. But before I talk about the end of this game, I have to talk about the city itself and the way you traverse it. Paris has spent the last 15 hours teetering on the edge of war. The people danced around bonfires, carried heads on spikes, and fought alongside you as you got into fights in the street. But now we're no longer teetering. Paris has erupted, and the desperation that clung to every inch of this city has changed. The revolution is well and truly here, and Paris has never looked better. When Unity was announced, all anyone could talk about was how many NPCs were on screen at one time, and even now it's impressive. You'll notice a lot of the same people, but crowds like this have never been seen before, and never seen since. Paris well and truly felt alive. The people brought it to life. But it would have been nothing without the backdrop of the city itself. If you've played a Ubisoft game, you'll know they're masters of the open world. Their games may be controversial, often shallow, but the detail that goes into the world is anything but, and Paris is no different. From the streets to the rooftops, the open windows and interiors of hundreds, if not thousands of houses, the beams and bars that decorate the sides of buildings, Paris may be Ubisoft's magnum opus. It may be the most realised world ever created. But the detail isn't just there for show. No, this is an Assassin's Creed game. Every building, beam and bar, every window and rope can be climbed. And just like Paris, parkour has never looked so good. But does it feel good? Well, the addition of a parkour down feature may be the best innovation a Ubisoft game has made in the past 2 decades. Being able to quickly and stylishly get down from any buildings removes so much of the frustration present in the older titles. Having to break your fall on people as Ezio or just break your knees as Altair is gone, and no more slowly climbing down a building. Climbing down is now just as fun as getting up, and the animations of parkour are brilliant. Arno looks beautiful as you traverse Paris. When everything works, it looks and feels amazing. And you have to commend the developers for putting in so much work in the parkour. But it doesn't come without its flaws. So let's go all the way back to 2007, the year of the first Assassin's Creed, and a game I played after Unity. This is where the parkour began. It's fairly simple. The animations look good but aren't anywhere near as flashy as Arno's. But even back in 2007, Altair had something that Arno doesn't: control. Unity did a couple of things with its parkour, things that can be explained in much more detail by people who know a lot more about it than me. But here goes. Paris is cluttered, maybe more so than any other city, and that sounds great. The more beams and things to climb on means more options for parkour, more ways to express yourself through movement. However, this was paired with a reliance on contextual controls, and for me, that just led to more frustration. Look, I understand the reason for adding contextual controls, but that paired with an inconsistent jump distance, where you can either clear an entire city block or no more than 2 feet, meant I never felt like I was in complete control of Arno. I felt like I only had partial custody of him. I was sharing with the animations. Compare that to Altair, where I was completely in control of him. Every stupid thing I did was my fault. When playing as Altair, if I told him to do a side eject or a back eject or to jump, no matter the circumstances, he'll do it. It means if you're climbing a high building, you can really easily throw yourself off if you just press the wrong button, which can be frustrating. But everything you do, you choose to do, and you choose to do it in that way. You never feel out of control, but you don't get that with Arno. Just look at how he jumps. One moment you'll be leaping from one rooftop to another, the next you'll be hopping from the edge of a window to a foot in front of you. The same input, but a completely different response. And it's because what you do is decided only in part by the buttons you press. It's also decided by what the game thinks you want to do. And if you add more possibilities, more beams to grab, more buildings to climb, more interiors to run through, then you run into the problem of the game not doing what you want because it thought you wanted to do something different, which can get incredibly frustrating. I've jumped past ropes that go between buildings only to land on the ground and die. I've leaped into haystacks and died. I can guess or assume what I'm going to do next, but I can never know. And this is most frustrating with side ejects. I'm quite new to the Assassin's Creed franchise, and I'm not the best at parkour, but when I play Assassin's Creed 1 and I side eject, it helps me scale a building faster, except for the many times I do it wrong and Altair just plants his face into a building before falling to the floor. But that's something I can learn from. I can learn when I should and shouldn't side eject. It's intuitive. But when I side eject as Arno, I sometimes do it, I sometimes don't. They're contextual. The animation is only triggered if you're the right distance from the object you want to hop to. And they did this to make sure the animations always looked great. But it came with a drawback. It means you're always at the mercy of the animations. It turns what should be an engaging movement system into something very passive. Just look at the climb leaps. If we go back to the Ezio trilogy, you had to leap and then grab onto the ledge you wanted to grab. But here in Unity, you double tap A and Arno grabs whatever ledge the animation made him grab. This means what was once an active movement where you were always in control has changed to a movement where you're only in control when you press the button. Most of Unity's parkour is made up of an input followed by an animation which you watch. And because most of parkour is made up of animations, you'll spend the majority of your time playing passively watching rather than actively engaging with it. And it extends to your side hops because you can only do them when the animation will trigger. You can never do them wrong, so the hop is a passive movement. What I wrote about Unity's parkour straight after finishing the game isn't what I believe now. Not after I've gone back and played a couple of hours here or there after finishing the Ezio games. Because those first 4 games provide the player with so much control and freedom that they're always fun to play around with and express yourself in. But Unity's animation-first focused design has led to its movement fundamentally failing because it's unwilling to let the player's hand go and give you full control. The cities are there to be run around and you have the tools to do it, but unfortunately, you're only allowed to use specific tools at certain moments. I know Arno can do what I ask, but half the time he just refuses because the animation won't look good. It's a system that's unwilling to let you fall, and we have to be able to fall in order to learn to climb, and we need to climb because we begin our final assassination on the Parisian rooftops. Germain is the man you're hunting. You rescued him earlier in the game. That's how you found out about the Templar's weapon that was used to kill Mr. Delasere. But it turns out he wasn't the innocent silversmith he came across as. No, Germain is actually the man at the heart of the Templar Order. He's the final piece of the mystery you've spent the last 20 hours uncovering. He's also the final piece of the modern day story. But I'm going to spend as much time caring about that as the game does. So none. Germain hides in a temple at the heart of Paris. It's one of the most heavily guarded black box missions. Exactly what you'd expect from the final mission. And Arno and Elise's job is to find and kill him. Well, actually Arno will find him and Elise will just join you later. This is probably more of a nitpick, but it would have been cool if she'd come with you and you could perform double assassinations. But even without that, this mission is still very good. You'll find him stood atop the highest tower, adorned in an oversized robe and wielding the Sword of Eden. He's a formidable opponent, but by catching him off guard, you'll be able to land a couple of strikes before he disappears. He's under the temple now, and this is where Elise joins you for one climactic boss fight. A boss fight scored by music that makes it feel far better than it is. Look, it's not as disappointing as the Belek fight. It makes use of Arno's parkour and stealth and makes for an enjoyable yet underwhelming final fight. But I'm not playing Assassin's Creed for the boss fights, and I also don't play them for the story. But I do have to see how this one pays off. Your final strike. Germain's health bar is depleted. You feel like you've won, but the Sword of Eden blasts you back through a pillar, and now Arno is buried, and the only person who can help him is Elise. These final moments between Arno and Elise are surprisingly strong, considering how shallow the relationship has been up until this point. Arno loves Elise, but all she wants is revenge, and she leaves him under the rubble to finally kill the man she's been hunting for the last 20 hours. You watch as she strikes him in slow motion, but she's thrown back, and so is Germain. He's nearly dead. But Elise is dead.
Elise! 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 Elise!
At this point, Arno has lost everyone he's ever cared about. He's about as broken as it gets, and the performance backs that up. Now, with no woman to chase, he has but only one task: to kill the man who killed Elise. A big aspect of what made Elise's death work so well was because it used one of the only pieces of key characterization she got. Her story is one of revenge. She is driven by an insatiable hate and nothing more. But Arno never was, not even in these final moments. As he slips the exposed blade slowly into the throat of the man who killed Elise, you don't feel hate. It's a kill driven more by grief, and it's one of the strongest moments this story has. This moment is slow and impactful. It's well performed and well written. It's a perfect ending. It works despite the shallowness of the rest of the story, and it was a very satisfying conclusion to a game that had managed to do nothing but frustrate me with the narrative up until this point. And Arno's speech to conclude the game felt like a perfect conclusion.
The creed of the Assassin Brotherhood teaches us that nothing is forbidden to us. Once, I thought that meant we were free to do as we would, to pursue our ideals no matter the cost. I understand now. Not a grant of permission, the creed is a warning. Ideals too easily give way to dogma. Dogma becomes fanaticism. No higher power sits in judgment of us. No supreme being watches to punish us for our sins. In the end, only we ourselves can guard against our obsessions. Only we can decide whether the road we walk carries too high a toll. We believe ourselves redeemers, avengers, saviors. We make war on those who oppose us, and they in turn make war on us. We dream of leaving our stamp upon the world. Even as we give our lives in a conflict that will be recorded in no history book. All that we do, all that we are, begins and ends with ourselves.
Its story lacked in so many areas, but it did manage to stick the landing, and I have to commend it for that. But Arno's story didn't end in Paris, it ended in Franciard, the location for the Dead King's expansion, a free and welcome expansion to Unity. Though I'll keep this section fairly brief because my thoughts on Dead Kings weren't that dissimilar to my thoughts on the base game. Franciard is stunning, a small town engulfed by fog. It's the perfect setting to explore Arno's grief, a grief that's matched by the darkened tone of the cutscenes. At this point, it does appear that he's lost all hope, and the way he treats Leo, a young orphan, reflects that. The relationship we see Arno and Leo develop is sweet. Arno starts off callous, speaking of hope as something that's pointless, but Leo, in his infinite naivety, wears him down. He breaks down Arno's grief and allows him to not be swallowed by the same fog that swallowed his town. It's some of my favourite Arno moments. At points, it feels like we finally get to see some of his character, the thing that's been obscured behind exposition and plot for most of the game's runtime, but it was still shallow. It still fell short of the series' best moments. Luckily, it does have one of the coolest final missions. There's a new enemy type in Franciad, raiders and their captains. Raiders are weak, and if you kill their captain, they'll flee. But if not, they'll swarm you and make for a pretty tough fight. And being swarmed by them can feel incredibly frustrating. So when you find the Piece of Eden, a lantern that sends swarms of bats at your enemies, you feel incredible. Slowly walking through swarms of raiders, killing them with ease, this weapon is far too powerful, and we get to feel that in one of my favourite moments from my time with this game. I said at the start of this video that this is only the second Assassin's Creed game I've played, but as I'm writing this script, I'm playing through the older titles, and in doing that I'm discovering a new perspective to look at Unity, one that in some ways is more positive and appreciative of some of its strengths, but also disappointed at where it falls short of even their first attempt. Unity isn't a bad game, far from it. It isn't a game that should be hated or ridiculed. Unity is a game that screams Ubisoft. It's almost great, but often disappointing. I love so many parts of this game, but it just doesn't work as a complete package. I can enjoy the parkour, but I'll still be reminded of what's been lost since the early titles. I can enjoy the story, but I know it could have been better, and it should have been. I think I will come back to Unity, probably after I finish the rest of the games, and maybe that fresh perspective will give me a whole new fondness for the game. But for now, all I can say is it's a game I don't regret spending my time with, an experience I would happily recommend to someone else, but one that holds a bitter taste because of what it could have been.